Fake Boyfriend. Young Love, Book 1. Written by Suzana Thompson. Narrated by Paulina Schubert. Chapter 5. As we walked through the halls holding hands, the illusion was real for me. The attention we were getting was the same as in every teen romance I'd ever read or watched, in which the hot guy shows up with the girl no one would ever expect him to notice. People were staring at us, but it was different than when they had stared at me when I had been by myself. Being with Gage had elevated me beyond their reach. He had chosen me, and all they could do was stare. I felt like I was starring in a Hollywood movie. "Do you need to stop at your locker?" Gage asked me. I tried to focus and think about the books I needed for my morning class. "Yes," I replied. He flashed a smile at me. "Lead the way." It was actually in the hallway I had first spotted him in. He hadn't spared a glance toward me then, but I had his complete attention today. Having him walk me to my locker and wait for me beside it was surreal. It was such a high school boyfriend thing to do, and it was one of those typical things in a teen girl's life that I hadn't expected to experience for myself. By this time, Gage had let go of my hand, of course, so that I could open my locker and get my books out. I was still in a dreamy state of bliss, though, as my romantic daydreams played out in real life. The next words he spoke kept me in my idyllic bubble of happiness. "My locker is right down the hall. We'll stop there for a minute and then I'll walk you to your first class." He took my hand again and held it during the short walk to his locker. Dylan was there and smirked when he saw us approaching. "Aw, look at the lovebirds holding hands. I hope this inspires you to write a ballad. That shit sells like crazy, so maybe it'll get us a record deal." "You write songs?" I asked Gage in amazement. He was becoming more romantic by the minute, in my estimation. "Yeah," he replied. "I told you I'm serious about this." "Speaking of," Dylan said, drawing our attention back to him, "we've got ourselves a gig this weekend. Reaper had to cancel at Sammy's because their singer was in a car accident. We're on for Saturday, so we gotta get into practice before that. Good thing you're not working Friday night." "Oh, but," Gage looked apologetically at me. "I was going to take you out, but would you mind coming to practice with me instead?" "Sure," I agreed. "I wanted to hear you sing anyway." "That's great that you've got a show this weekend," I exclaimed enthusiastically before remembering why. "Oh, but not great about the accident. I hope that singer is okay." "Just a broken leg," Dylan said. "So you're allowed to be happy for us," he added with a laugh. "Can I come to the show too?" I asked excitedly. "I don't know if you want to see that," Dylan teased. "You might get jealous when the groupies start throwing their panties at me." My eyes went wide as I stared at him aghast. Do they really do that? Dylan and Gage both cracked up at my question, and I turned my head to watch Gage as he laughed. His blue eyes were filled with mirth, and his expression was one of carefree enjoyment, as masculine laughter poured forth from his open mouth. I drank in the sight of him having fun. "Oh," Dylan gasped between laughs, "you are too cute." "What?" I questioned, trying to figure out what was so funny. I glanced at Gage, who was now grinning at me. "We're not playing an arena," Dylan explained, his laughter having subsided now too. "We're not at the panty-throwing stage yet, but feel free to throw yours if—" "Dylan!" Gage snapped, not sounding at all amused anymore. His grip on my hand had tightened slightly, and he was scowling. "I was just kidding," Dylan held up his hands in a placating gesture. "No disrespect, man. I know she's your girl." Dylan gave him a curt nod before shifting his attention to me. "I'd better get you to class." "You don't have to walk me there," I replied. "I don't want to make you late to your class." "Plenty of time," he assured me. "Just tell me the room number." He let go of my hand and quickly opened his locker. "Okay, see you," Dylan said, and took off. "Bye," I called after him and pulled my schedule out of my purse. I knew where my class was located, but I hadn't memorized the room number yet. Gage was already done getting out the books he needed when I shoved the schedule back into my purse and glanced toward him. He closed his locker and swung his backpack over his shoulder before turning to look at me expectantly. I told him my classroom number, and he reached for my hand again before we set off down the hall. I was barely noticing anyone around us anymore, as Gage navigated us through the crowd of students. A warm, fuzzy feeling had enveloped me, and I felt like I was drifting through a wonderful daydream. When we stopped walking, I was surprised to see that we had arrived at my classroom. Most of the journey there had gone unnoticed by me. I roused myself and looked at Gage. "Thank." The next word I was about to speak never made it out of my mouth, as I let out a breath instead, as Gage pressed me back toward the wall. I stared up at him uncomprehendingly as his gaze captured mine. He was lowering his head toward me before I knew what was happening, and then I stood frozen in disbelief as I realized he was going to kiss me. My heart began to pound even before he pressed his lips to mine. Then it practically galloped out of my chest as a thrill shot through me at the contact. It was soft and exquisite, and the most exciting thing I had ever experienced. My hands came up to grab the back of his neck and help me pull myself up so our lips could press more firmly against each other. His hand took hold of the back of my head as he moved his mouth over mine, causing sensations I couldn't get enough of. The sound of the warning bell broke us apart as Gage pulled back from me at its loud ringing. I was again unable to do anything except stare at him as his gaze traveled over my face, seemingly taking stock of the effect his kiss had wrought on me. He then glanced down the hall before looking at me again. "He's gone," he told me. "Who?" I asked, regaining the ability to speak, although I was still a bit breathless. "That asshole from yesterday," he replied. "He was looking at you like he owns you, so I decided to show him that he doesn't." I concluded that he was talking about Damon, and that he had kissed me only because of Damon. Disappointment punctured the romantic bubble I'd been floating around in, and mortification quickly seeped in. "Good idea," I praised him, desperately hoping that he couldn't tell how affected I had been by that kiss, and still was. "I have to go," he said, "but I'll catch you at lunch." Thankfully, he took off without waiting for a response from me. It was then that I was able to take a full breath and try to calm myself. I was freaking out both over finally getting my first kiss, and over the fact that I had foolishly developed a crush on Gage. Even worse, from the moment he held my hand until after that perfect kiss, I had actually forgotten that everything between us was fake. Having crushes on unattainable guys was nothing new for me, or for most girls who weren't popular. That was normal enough. However, thinking that a guy like that was into me and that he was really my boyfriend, that was crossing a line into delusional. I cringed at the thought of how truly pathetic Gage would think I was if he knew that I couldn't distinguish between pretend and real life. Part of the problem was that I was so inexperienced, I decided as I sat in another class I paid absolutely no attention in. Since I'd never had a boyfriend before, even having a fake one was a big deal to me. Everything was so new and overwhelming that I couldn't help getting caught up in it. I also couldn't help placing importance on my first kiss, especially since it had surpassed anything that I had imagined. The real thing was so much better than my vague fantasies. And that right there was the problem. Gage might be pretending to like me, but he had given me a real kiss. That was the part of this that we couldn't fake. There was no way to create an illusion of kissing. If we wanted to convince people that we were kissing, we had to actually kiss. Even Hollywood actors couldn't get around that one. Panic set in as I realized that I was no actress. It wouldn't be long before Gage noticed that I was attracted to him, and that would be completely mortifying. Because he was clearly unaffected by me and had been able to coldly decide to kiss me as a mere screw you to Damon, whereas I had forgotten about the very existence of Damon, and about everything else. The rest of the world had disappeared when Gage kissed me, and I hadn't been aware of anything but him. It had chased off Damon again, I reminded myself. I needed to focus on the purpose of this whole thing. I had been worried about Gage not holding up his end of the bargain, but he was surpassing everything I had expected of him. The problem wasn't Gage, it was me. I was the one who was screwing this up. "I'm not going to ruin this," I resolved. My plan was working, and I had to see it through. Damon had faded from my mind, but I called back the memory of him coming at me naked, all the fear and panic I had felt. I recalled his ultimatum, and the way everyone had looked at me on the first day of school, and how alone I had felt. I didn't feel alone anymore, and that was the main thing. Gage stood beside me and warned them to back off. He held my hand and offered to sit with me at lunch. I felt safe and protected when I was with him, and I knew that nobody could get me as long as I had him. He was like a buffer between me and them, and that was the reason I had approached him in the first place. And you also get the perks of kissing a hot guy, I could imagine Emily telling me. My heart seemed to stop at that thought. Perks. Plural. Would Gage kiss me again? My heart started hammering in my chest. The memory of how it felt sprang up fresh in my mind, and my lips tingled in response. I began to crave the feeling of his mouth against mine, and the remembered sensations had my stomach fluttering excitedly. No, I told myself, alarmed at how much I wanted another kiss from him. This was not part of the plan. I hadn't factored kissing into this charade at all. It had only been about fooling Courtney into thinking that he was my boyfriend. He was just supposed to pick me up from the house so that she could believe that I was going on dates with him. We were hardly supposed to have any contact at all, let alone kiss. I needed to set boundaries and get things back under control. I would just tell Gage that we shouldn't kiss anymore. Extreme nervousness suddenly overwhelmed me as soon as that thought entered my mind. Just imagining talking to Gage about kissing, about bringing up the subject at all. You're being ridiculous, I chided myself. He won't even care. It's not like he made a big deal about the kiss. It was just a tactic to him. It's not like he wanted to kiss me. I just had to act as unaffected by it as he was. Getting flustered was what would make it embarrassing. If I just played it cool and casual, then it would be no big deal. I managed to calm myself with that thinking, but that only lasted until I saw Gage again. I spotted him standing in front of the cafeteria, watching my approach, and my heartbeat sped up immediately. I almost fled in panic, but he walked forward to meet me. "Sarah," he said in a warm tone that had me helplessly melting into his smile. "You're here. I'm glad I didn't have to send out a search party to the library." I was smiling back at him, and he took my hand as he moved to stand beside me. "Come on, let's get lunch." We walked into the cafeteria together, holding hands, and he didn't let go until he ushered me in front of him in the lunch line. "What are you going to get?" he asked. I glanced at the choices and lit up upon the safe and familiar. "Pizza." "Me too," he said. "That's my favorite food." "Pizza is good," I agreed. "Yeah, it's pretty hard to screw it up," he remarked. "So what's your favorite food?" "Ice cream," I answered enthusiastically. He laughed. "I meant your favorite meal. That's just a snack. You can't make a meal out of ice cream." "You can if you eat the whole container," I joked before I realized how that would sound. My mom's admonition about how many calories were in ice cream came back to me, and my face heated at the thought of Gage believing that I gorged myself on ice cream. "I don't really eat the whole container," I backtracked as he laughed. His expression sobered as he looked at me. "Hey, it's okay to splurge." "But I don't eat that much," I insisted, and flushed even more at how that sounded, like I was trying to convince him that I hardly ate anything. I glanced away from him and angled my body to face forward more than sideways. "You can eat how much you want," he said. The line moved forward, and I was spared from any more conversation with him, since I had now arrived at the food station. "A piece of cheese pizza," I told the lady serving the food. I heard Gage ask for a slice of pepperoni pizza behind me as I moved forward to the drink station and grabbed a bottle of water. Pulling my new prepaid lunch card out of my purse, I handed it to the cashier. She swiped it and handed it back to me as Gage came up next to me. I picked up my tray and stepped away from the cashier. But then I was forced to wait for Gage to accompany me out to the tables. Still feeling awkward and embarrassed, I was starting to regret not hiding away in the library like I had yesterday. "This way," Gage said as he stepped up next to me, carrying his tray, and began to walk past the nearest tables. I followed slightly behind him, but he slowed his pace so that I couldn't avoid walking beside him. "Are you a vegetarian?" he asked. "No," I replied, glad that my blush had subsided. "You don't like pepperoni?" he asked incredulously. I glanced at my plain pizza. "I do, but..." "But what?" he prompted. "It's greasy and bad for you," I said, repeating my mom's criticisms whenever I wanted that topping. "If you're going to eat pizza, you're better off getting vegetables on it." I inwardly cringed at hearing myself lecture him. No, if you're going to splurge on pizza, then you should get the most delicious one you can find. Unfortunately, you won't find it in a school cafeteria, but pizza is still pizza. I'll take you to Fratello's sometime so you can taste the best pizza around here. He was confusing me again by talking about taking me places like we were an actual couple. Since no one was listening to our conversation, he hadn't said it for their benefit. Maybe he wanted to be friends with me. That thought made my heart surge with happiness. If we were friends, then he wouldn't just drop me and have nothing else to do with me after our fake romance was over. I loved the thought of still having him in my life. He laughed, sounding just as happy as I felt. Look at that smile. You're so easy to please. I've never had my girlfriend get. All the enthusiasm was erased from his expression as he trailed off. I watched him in dismay, trying to figure out what was wrong. He focused his gaze dead ahead. Hey, he acknowledged Dylan and set his tray down on the table he was seated at. Sarah! Dylan greeted me with all the zeal Gage was suddenly lacking. I'm so glad you're here to improve the view. I'm getting tired of looking at Gage's ugly face. Have a seat, Sarah, Gage told me and indicated the space beside him. I approached hesitantly and set my tray down. He waited for me to sit down before taking his own seat. Hi, Dylan, I said as I tried to get past the awkwardness I was feeling. What's going on with you two? He asked. I didn't know what to say in response, and I was waiting to hear how Gage would answer that. His bewildering change of attitude had happened so abruptly. I replayed our conversation in my mind, trying to pinpoint what exactly. My gaze flew toward him as I recalled his exact words before he trailed off. Do you have a girlfriend? The guarded look on his face changed to confusion. You said, my girlfriend, I accused before he could respond. You should have told me you had a girlfriend. I don't have a girlfriend, he cut in. I wouldn't start anything with you if I did. Hi, a female voice said. I heard the sound of trays being set on the table as I turned my head in that direction. A pretty girl was sitting down in the chair beside me, and an attractive guy was taking a seat next to her. I'm Amber, she told me. Hi, I responded. I'm Sarah. This is my boyfriend, Jason, she said. And you're Gage's girlfriend? Hi, I said, directing my gaze toward Jason before immediately returning my attention to Amber. Yeah, I am. She is, Gage confirmed, scooting his chair closer to me and taking hold of my hand. He brushed his thumb soothingly over my skin. I glanced at him, and his smile conveyed that we were okay now. He seemed to have gotten over whatever had been troubling him before, but I couldn't help wondering what it had been. He was a moody person in general, and I could have just chalked it up to his brooding personality. However, the way he had abruptly cut short his sentence made me think that something specific had triggered it. My mind kept returning to him saying, my girlfriend. He obviously hadn't been talking about me, so it had to be another girlfriend. If he didn't currently have one, then it had to be an ex-girlfriend. That had me curious about her. I wondered what kind of girl he was attracted to, and what she had looked like. Had he been in love with her? How long had they dated, and why did they break up? She must not go to this school, or Courtney would have known about her. I distinctly remembered my stepsister telling me that Gage didn't date. This brought up the question of where he had met her. Maybe it had been at one of his shows. She might have been in the audience and caught his eye. I suddenly felt very jealous of her, if she was pretty enough for him to notice her in a crowd. Of course she would be beautiful, I chided myself. Look at him. What else did you expect? Why weren't they still together then? What had happened? Thinking about her had upset him, so he had obviously cared for her. My heart sank as I realized that he might still have feelings for her. Why that would depress me was best left unexamined. I focused instead on the people I was having lunch with, especially Amber. She was just curious about me at first, but then she seemed to warm up to me as we talked. That really sucks having to move right before your senior year, she sympathized. Leaving behind the home you grew up in and all your friends. The bad part was being separated from my best friend, I replied. I was actually excited about going somewhere new, but I wished that I could bring Emily with me. We always dreamed about going on adventures together, and she thought that living in California would be so glamorous. I laughed and then worried that I had offended her. Yeah, Lodi is a long way from Hollywood, she remarked wryly. But at least you escaped the Colorado winters. Denver actually has pretty mild winters, I told her. Similar to here, from what I've read. But if we had moved to Los Angeles, I could have been working on my tan all winter. That's where I'm moving after graduation, Gage said. You're going to college there too? I asked excitedly as I turned my head to look at him. I'm not going to college, he replied. We're moving there, to work on getting a record deal. I blinked at him. Not going to college? Everyone I knew talked about where they wanted to go to college, even the jocks. But going to school would help you get... I trailed off, because I couldn't say in front of his friends that it would help him get out of poverty. A college degree won't help me get a record deal, he said. I have to get out there in the music scene and get our band known. Can't you do both? I questioned. You could still play shows on the weekends like you do now and go to class during the week. I'll have to work a full-time job to pay for rent and other expenses, he retorted. Besides, a degree in what? This is the only thing that I've ever wanted to do. They're good, Amber said. Wait until you hear them play. You're coming to the show on Saturday, right? You'll be there too? I asked, glad that I wouldn't be alone in the audience. Yeah, I wouldn't miss it. Jason is in the band too, she told me proudly. Oh, I responded. So you guys were all friends and decided to start a band? No, Gage replied. We became friends after we formed the band. I looked at him in surprise. But how did you get together to start the band? I held auditions, he said. That's how I found Dylan and Jason. I gaped at him, trying to wrap my mind around it. You held auditions? Like he was some kind of music mogul instead of a guy in high school. He shrugged. It was the only way to find the musicians I needed. I had to hear them play. We had to hear him sing, too, Dylan laughed. We didn't want to be in a band with some guy who only thinks he can sing. I mean, you've heard some of those awful singers on TV embarrassing themselves. Somebody should have stopped them. Yeah, I agreed. They're so funny to watch, but their families or friends should have told them the truth. Maybe that's all just staged, Amber suggested. I think they probably pay people with bad voices to go on so they can make the shows more entertaining. I never thought of that, I exclaimed. I hope you're right. It's not so bad then if they did it on purpose. I always felt bad for laughing at them, but I couldn't help it. You know they couldn't hear you through the TV screen, Gage remarked in amusement. I know, but I still felt bad. He smiled softly as he gazed at me. Because you're sweet. My stomach dipped at how he said that, and my body became warm like the temperature in the room had risen. Wow, Amber said, sounding odd. You guys are really... I know, Dylan said. It's like one of those damn chick flicks. All they do is make eyes at each other. I never thought I'd see the Iceman melt. My cheeks blazed with embarrassment as my gaze dropped to my lunch tray. If Gage was making eyes at me, it was only because he was playing the role. My infatuation with him was no longer pretend, though, and it was so mortifying to think that he could see it whenever I looked at him. I had to find a way to convince him that I was acting too. Acting! That was it! The bell rang just as I had my eureka moment, and everything fell into place when Gage offered to walk me to class. I could fix this right away before he started to suspect that I had a crush on him. You have great acting skills, I complimented him after we took our leave of his friends. Are you taking drama? Maybe I'm not acting, he teased. My heart skipped a beat even though I knew he was joking. I ignored his banter and pushed on. Because I was in drama at my old school, I lied. I thought I was good, but you've got me beat. The smile slid off his face. You're an actress? Just in school productions, I replied, wondering if he had something against actresses. Not a professional one. Anyway, I hope I look as convincing as you in this. Your friends seem to buy it at least. You're convincing, he replied flatly, and I wondered why he was so displeased. Good, I said, although things suddenly seemed far from good with him. He was still holding my hand as we walked through the halls, but his demeanor gave the impression that he had pulled away from me. When we arrived at my classroom, the words he spoke held no emotion. See you later, babe. He didn't bother smiling at me before he walked away. I stood there watching him and wondering what had just happened.